If you grew up a child of the 90s like myself, there's a pretty good chance you are still a huge fan of the bands that came out of the Seattle music scene during that period. You had the big four: Nirvana, Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, and of course, the greatness of Alice in Chains, arguably one of the most unique bands to come out of that entire music scene in that era of rock. We will dive into their vinyl catalog and talk about whether or not we think represses are coming. Some of those albums that are really hard to find, we will discuss on this episode, Talking About Records. My name is G.I. Sanders from NTX Vinyl, a small chain of independent record shops in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. If you're not local, but you are in the U.S., you can shop online, ntxvinyl.com, and of course would love it if you would subscribe to our channel here on YouTube. Follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and you can also sign up for our email list at our website as well. Let's talk about Alice in Chains. Definitely one of my favorite artists of all time. I have been a huge fan since the very early days. They're getting talked about a lot right now, even more so than normal, because they recently reissued their iconic album Dirt, which 30th anniversary has just passed of that album. It's mind-boggling to think that it was been 30 years ago since Dirt came out, but that's how old we are. I've got my collection of Alice in Chains. I own most of everything in their discography. I am going to walk you through those, and we will talk a little bit about whether or not I think represses are coming of some of their other albums, which right now are out of print. It's been interesting to see the vinyl community go crazy over the reissues of not only Dirt but also Facelift. And we will talk about Facelift first, obviously, because I'm going to start at the very beginning of the discography. It is one that I do not have an original pressing of. I have got the reissue, which is right here. This was reissued in 2020, came out about 2 years ago. Pretty readily available at that time, just as Dirt is right now. Unfortunately, it's already back out of print and back ordered everywhere. So if I go to any of my different distributors that I order from and try and get this album, I cannot get it. Everyone's got it back ordered because they only ran so many and they sold out, and now we're back waiting in line. Is it going to get repressed again? One would think that they would keep these in print, especially knowing how much demand is there within the vinyl community. It seems that they have pressed enough of Dirt to go around to keep it around for a little bit, but we saw the same thing happen with Facelift, so I'm not sure if Dirt was given a much higher number. You would think because it was a more popular album, maybe they pressed more, but Facelift is, the band's debut album came out August 21st, 1990. If you don't know the history of Alice in Chains, they were very much a hair metal band in the late 80s and morphed into the band we know, and the band that recorded Facelift. It's a pretty fascinating story how Jerry Cantrell and Lane Staley came to meet and form a band back in those days. If you're not familiar with it, definitely check out the origins of their story. It's a great debut record. Man in the Box was the biggest single by far, and still a song that is in their set list to this day, and rightfully so. We Die Young, Sea of Sorrow were also singles. They were early. They were really early. Soundgarden and Alice in Chains, both, Soundgarden especially, predated everybody on the grunge scene as far as the bands that went big and became mainstream. Alice in Chains was early as well, and they kind of followed suit. So again, this came out in 90. Pre, obviously, Nirvana, Nevermind, and Pearl Jam 10, when everything exploded. So back in these days, radio and promoters didn't know where to put Alice in Chains, so they were opening up for all kinds of hair metal bands and playing with tons of bands that now looking back they don't really seem to fit with, but at the time nobody knew what to do with them. Radio didn't know what format they were, because they weren't hair metal, but they weren't classic rock, they weren't heavy metal, so like they were in this weird in-between period genre-wise, which, you know, to their credit, they were creating a new thing, their own thing, as all of those bands were, from that Seattle scene at that time. So I still love this record. I love getting a peek into those early days. It Ain't Like That is probably my favorite track off this one. I love all the singles, of course. Bleed the Freak is really killer as well. It's a great record. You know, this is featuring original bassist Michael Starr, of course, who was on the first two records. I think it's in this reissue in particular, the 2020 reissue, remastered by Bob Ludwig, absolutely phenomenal, a 2 LP. So I'm glad that they did reissue this one, and I'm very hopeful that they continue to keep it in reprint. I'm a little surprised that they didn't get it repressed along with the Dirt reissue that just came out, but we still haven't seen it and no one really knows. Unfortunately, I'll tell you, in working in this industry for a couple years, we never know what's coming. Like, we get very little heads up as record store owners. And I can tell you the distributors that we work with don't get much more heads up either. I've asked, and I finally learned that it's just not worth asking anymore because they don't have any idea what's coming. So I can't tell you if a Facelift reissue is coming. All I can say is I'm hoping along with all of you. I do have one other copy. I don't own an original of Facelift, unfortunately. I'd love to pick one up. It was not released originally in the US. I believe there's only a Brazilian and maybe a Mexican pressing. Don't ask me why. That makes no sense, but that's just the way they rolled back then. A lot of the albums that came out of the early 90s rock scene didn't come out in the US originally. This second copy I have is an unofficial, and it's on a white vinyl. The 2020 reissue is a double LP on black vinyl. So I have this unofficial, which I originally had for many years, before they finally reissued it. And I've had a chance to buy original copies over the years, but the price is always just a little too steep, and I just have never committed to it. So hopefully one day I'll be able to pick up an original copy, and also hopefully you'll be able to pick up a copy, period, if they end up reissuing the album. So, oh, I'm sorry, before I dive into Dirt, I forgot I've got this this We Die Young single. This is one of the most recent releases from Alice in Chains, other than the Dirt reissue. This is the first studio EP, the We Die Young single. Also features It Ain't Like That and Killing Yourself. This was a Record Store Day release in 2021. 3-track single, black vinyl. You can still pick this up if you want to like complete everything that they've released on vinyl. So pretty cool single. Totally forgot about that one. All right, after Facelift, the next release from Alice in Chains was the Sap EP. It came out February of 1992, and you know, it didn't come out on vinyl. It only came out on CD in February of 92. The vinyl release didn't come until they put it out with the Jar of Flies EP, which came after Dirt. So a little bit of confusion. This particular version, this is the Record Store Day version, which includes only Sap, not with Jar of Flies. This was I think a 2021 Record Store Day release. I don't see a 2020 Record Store Day release. So this is only Sap, which is Brother, Got Me Wrong, Right Turn, Am I Inside, and Love Song. This is produced by the band and Rick Perisher, and recorded at London Bridge in Seattle. A really cool little EP. It's interesting that they would go from an album like Facelift, which is obviously very driven as far as electric guitars and loud drums are concerned, and then break it down immediately and follow it up with an acoustic bass EP, which is one of the things I love about Alice in Chains. And honestly, a lot of the bands that came out of that scene would do that a lot, whether it was the Unplugged sessions or whether just, you know, being able to translate their songs into, you know, acoustic versions or even write acoustic based songs. So I really appreciated the fact that they did this. This was kind of my intro to Alice in Chains, believe it or not. I, of course, heard Man of the Box, knew that Facelift was out there. I don't think I owned it talking about mainly on CD back in the day. But when this album came out, I think the reason why I was introduced to it is because Chris Cornell is on this album. And I was already a big Soundgarden fan at that time, you know, and knew their earlier records. So when I got introduced to this, it was like, hey, Cornell's on this. I should definitely check it out. And I knew Man in the Box. I just wasn't a huge fan yet. But I really do appreciate this. And it's cool that they finally put this out as a standalone vinyl because, you know, for years it's only been paired with Jar Flies, which I'll show you here in a moment. But just a really cool thing to be able to complete the discography on vinyl and have Sap, which is a really cool EP. Again, 5 songs. I think all of them are great, you know, other than the extra song at the end, which is pretty much a joke or filler song. But you've got, I mean, some of these songs, like Brother, Got Me Wrong, Right Turn, and Am I Inside, those 4 tracks, I know how to play every single one of them on guitar because this is, again, acoustic-based stuff. And so I love being able to listen to songs and know exactly how they're pieced together from an arrangement perspective and what chords they're in. And just a big inspiration on me when I started playing guitar because I started on acoustic guitar, and these were some of the songs that you can latch onto pretty well. So really love Sap, and again, appreciate that they put it out. Hopefully that one will get a broader reissue. I don't know if that was an RSD exclusive or if it was an RSD first. RSD first means that eventually they'll repress it. My gut says since that's pretty unique and it's only, you know, a 5-track little EP, that that may be the only version we ever see of it. I don't know if it'll get a broader release. We shall see. Then comes Dirt. I will start with the most recent remaster, the 30th anniversary, which just came out, readily available now as of when I'm recording this video. We'll see how long it stays available. Absolutely phenomenal. Highly recommend picking it up. I've heard mostly good reviews. Apparently there's 2 different pressings of it as far as the plants they were pressed at, and there's some discrepancies as far as the differences between those. The copy I've had and listened to right there is absolutely stellar, and I've heard, like I said, mostly good feedback, so I would definitely recommend it. I've got 3 other copies going back in chronological order. This is I think the 2009, yes, 2009 Music on Vinyl pressing. This was prior to the 30th anniversary reissue. This was the most recent. It shot up in value really just in the past couple years, because prior to that, up until about 2019 was readily available and you could pick it up anywhere. The main difference is this is a single LP versus the double LP remaster. I actually prefer the remaster a little bit, give it a little bit of an edge, mainly because I think they split it out over two LPs, just gives it a little more room to breathe. But the Music on Vinyl pressing can't be denied. It's a good pressing as well, and I enjoyed it for years, and I think I'll probably still hang on to both, mainly just because they're completely different. I don't collect a lot of different variants of albums, but when it comes to bands like Alice in Chains that I really love, I don't mind having a couple different copies of Dirt. Then I have got, this is the one I've had the longest. This is a pressing by Simply Vinyl. I don't have the year handy. It's a UK pressing by Simply Vinyl. I want to say it came out in the mid-2000s, maybe just prior to the Music on Vinyl pressing. And it's pretty good. Not as good as the Music on Vinyl, and definitely not as good as the new remaster. But again, this is one that I've had a long time, so I've just held on to it because this is the original copy that I've had of Dirt for many, many years. And then I do have an original pressing of Dirt, which I love. This is the Brazilian, or no, I'm sorry. This looks like a European reissue. The Brazilian was the version of Facelift I was thinking of. So I was able to get an original copy of Dirt. Similar to Facelift, Dirt did not come out on vinyl in the US. I have no idea why, because you've got, you know, other albums by the rest of the big four and other bands from that you know, that area of the country and from that rock scene. Everything came out, a lot of stuff did come out in the US, but there's like outliers like this that just didn't get released. So very hard to come by because of that, because you couldn't find them in the US. So I was happy to come across this one just a few years ago. Honestly, I did not buy this one originally back in the day. I would rank Dirt as, you know, I love all Alice in Chains records, but I would put Dirt here and in first place as far as not only my favorite, but also what I think is the best album from a songwriting perspective, from a production perspective, just all around. Even the artwork itself, I would put it up here, and I would put everything else, second place starts way down here for me. I really love Dirt. And I like all the records, don't get me wrong, but if you're going to ask me, what's the starting point or what is the pinnacle as far as Alice in Chains, Dirt is by far my recommendation. I don't want to name every track, but obviously you've got Them Bones, Down in a Hole, Rooster, the big singles. If you go into the album tracks, I think they're just as good, if not better. Junkhead and Sick Man and Godsmack and Hate to Feel, and it's just all good. Again, I don't have to name every track. I pretty much think I already have, but it's just one of those timeless albums to me. It represents that grunge, even though I hate that word, it represents that grunge era, I think, as good, if not better, than any of the albums. I have a hard time using that word just because I think it pigeonholes all those bands into one sound. And really, if you listen to Pearl Jam and then Alice in Chains and Nirvana, like, they're completely different sounds, other than the fact that they're all guitar-driven bands, writing rock songs. But, just because they all came out of the same scene, they got the label, and that's totally fine. I get it. Everyone's kind of moved past that at this point, but I still struggle to use the word. But I do think Alice in Chains, if you were going to say who's the grungiest band that came out of Seattle, I think that's probably got to be Alice in Chains as far as the ones that really made it to the mainstream. They've just got a sound that is really, I think, pairs with that word well. So Dirt is that iconic album, and I hope it stays in print. I really do. You never know these days. I've bought up a ton of the copies of the remaster just to make sure I can have it in stock for as long as possible, because I kind of learned my lesson with Facelift, because you never really know how many they press of these albums, and you don't really know what the demand is out there. But I can tell you, as far as Dirt is concerned, I've got my fill of them, and I'm hopefully going to keep them in stock for quite a while. So I'm excited about that. All right, next up, let's see. We've got a single, which this is probably one of the rarer things in my collection. I don't have everything Alice in Chains has put out. In fact, I've got a few 7-inch singles I didn't even grab. This is just my 12-inch stuff. This is the single for Them Bones. Also features We Die Young off Facelift. And then it's got Me Wrong and Am I Inside, which came from the Sap EP. This is cool because it's, first of all, it's a UK only single. Says strictly limited edition, individually numbered, 4-track on blue vinyl. As you can see, it's a die cut sleeve, which is really cool. And it is a blue LP, which is really nice. Just a really cool record. It took me a few years to track this one down. I think I probably got it maybe within 2022 I got this. And it's got a little bit of wear on the jacket, but it's just one of those that's really hard to find. Again, because it was only released in the UK for whatever reason. You'd think, being a US band, you'd think you'd have more stuff like this coming out in the US, but most of the 12-inch singles and even a lot of the cooler 7-inch stuff only came out in the UK. So this is a pretty cool collector's item. It's got a number on the back, so it's number 4,498. I have no idea how many they pressed or if that's even readily available, but definitely a cool one in my collection and one I appreciate. So after the Dirt era, then the band follows suit and does another acoustic bass record, and that is Jar of Flies, released January 25th, 1994. I remember the day this came out. I didn't get the vinyl the day that came out, the LP, but I remember going to buy the CD. This was a huge record. Again, the follow-up to Dirt. It came not too long after, so January of 94, following up Dirt, which was September of 92. So, less than 2 years later, the band was huge at this point. The Seattle scene had completely exploded, of course. And then again, they throw you another curveball and they go back to acoustic-driven stuff. This one differs a little bit from Sap in that it's got more instrumentation, especially if you look at songs like I Stay Away, which was a big single. There's a lot more going on there than on the Sap tunes. Love the bass intro on Rotten Apple. Nutshell is a timeless song, which is just incredible because it's the same four chords, I think, for the entire song. That's how good the melodies are that it can carry it. No Excuses is phenomenal. Whale and Wasp is pretty cool with some extra instrumentation. Don't Follow, Swing on This. Love all of these, and like I mentioned about SAP, I know how to play all of these, so it just makes it that much more fun. These are songs that I cut my teeth on when I learned how to play guitar back in the day. And so this is interesting because you've got the double-sided LP where they combine the two EPs into a set, which is just really cool. This is an original pressing on colored vinyl. So you've got Jar Flies on the translucent orange, which matches the artwork, of course. Really, really cool. And then you've got this version of SAP, which is the original version, that is on blue vinyl and comes with an etching on the backside because, again, it's only 5 tracks, so you don't need the entire LP. But I'm sorry, 4 tracks, not counting Love Song, which would be 5th. So really cool set. Happy to have this one in my collection. I had this for many, many years. I think I got this probably late 90s, if I had to guess, maybe early 2000s. But glad to have that one in my collection. It is essentially identical to the second copy I have, but the second copy is on black vinyl. So no difference in regards to packaging and track list and everything. They just released the colored version first, and then I believe the black vinyl came second. But at the time, and I don't know if this holds true now, this was the best-selling EP or extended play release of all time, Jar Flies, that being, and rightfully so. I think it was a huge album for the band, or EP for the band, all over MTV, and just really extended their position as one of those like cornerstone bands of the early to mid 90s. So love Jar Flies, love SAP. Those are such a great pairing. All right, next up on the list is the self-titled album, or Tripod as it's known, or Three-Legged Dog as it's known, but the proper name is Alice in Chains. This album, as well as Jar Flies, and we will get to Unplugged, are the big three that people are waiting on. I think this one more than any because this has never been reissued, which is really mind-boggling. It was released November 7th, 1995. This is an original pressing, which came on black vinyl. I can't really understand, and I don't think a lot of people can, why this album has never been repressed since 1995. My gut says it's tied up in legalities. I have no basis for that, but that's the only thing the only way I can justify it in my head. It doesn't make any sense. As big as sellers are, big of vinyl sellers on Dirt and even Jar Flies, when they did the music on vinyl pressings, I'm like, why did this one not follow? It doesn't really make sense. It wasn't quite as popular as some of those, but again, in 95, it was still a huge album and had big singles on it. Again, I think was the first single off this record. Let's see, Shame on You. Heaven Beside You was a big single as well. That was all over radio, and it doesn't really make sense why it wouldn't get it. Over Now was another big single. Probably my favorite song from this record is Frogs. If you're not familiar with Frogs, that is an amazing song. Let's see, Head Creeps, again, man, just it's a shame that more people don't own it. So do we think this is going to get a reissue? I mean, common sense tells you that whoever's pressing up the 30th anniversary of Dirt, and I'm sure they're, I don't know how many they pressed of that, maybe 20,000 copies or something like that to try and meet demand. I could be way wrong on that. That's just my guess. But you would think, the same camp, the same people over at Columbia, Sony, would have this on their radar. I mean, again, it's been since 95. It's been, almost 30 years on this one, 25 years. So it's like, why has it not come? Nobody really knows. Hopefully they'll do it justice. It's already a double LP. There's no reason they shouldn't repress this. So very frustrating, I know, for everybody involved who's a fan of Alice in Chains. But like I said, I don't have any other information than you do because we don't get that information. I have a second copy of this one. This one is a highly bootlegged album because so many people do want it. This is an unofficial copy coming out of Europe, and it's on a translucent kind of yellowish green, which kind of matches the dog's eye, which is really cool and actually sounds pretty good. So if you can get your hands on one of these, it's kind of a good placeholder until they officially release the actual album. It was a weird time for the band. If you know anything about the band, at this time, by 95, Lane Staley was already in really bad shape with his drug addiction, unfortunately. So they did not do a lot of touring on this album. There's a few TV appearances you can check, and there were sporadic tour dates, and they ended up opening for Kiss, I think, on a string of dates was the last shows they did, other than the Unplugged set, which I'll segue into. So, like I said, I'm hoping, along with the rest of you, that the self-titled Alice in Chains gets a reissue. It would seem quite crazy that they wouldn't bring that to the fans, but you never know these days. So, all right, I mentioned Unplugged. That is next on the list. Let's see. Unplugged was released July 30th, 1996. So not that long after self-titled. And again, the band was kind of in and out of the public eye during this whole period because of Lane's problems. Unplugged was really one of those moments where you're like, man, this is amazing. Maybe they're back. Maybe this is going to be the thing that brings them back into being an active band, because they were so kind of sporadically active during this period because of Jar Flies, because of Sap, and then even a number of the songs on Dirt. This is just one of the most amazing live performances, in my opinion. One of my favorite Unplugs, along with Nirvana, I think, being the top two by far. And it's a really it's amazing thing to watch and listen to. There's a bit of sadness there because you can kind of see the condition Lane is in, but the performance he pulls off is incredible. The whole band is great, and I think more than any of the bands from this era, Alice in Chains lend themselves to an Unplugged more than anyone else, because again, those EPs are so acoustic based already, and they really focused the Unplugged set on them, which is to be expected. But it was a great performance. Nutshell, brother, no excuses. Then you've got Sludge Factory off of self-titled record. You've got Down in a Hole, Angry Chair, and Rooster off Dirt. Got Me Wrong, back off Sap. Wood is just an incredible acoustic version on here. Frogs, like I mentioned, I do love the Unplugged version. Over Now, and Killer Is Me, which is the one bonus track on here, meaning it's the only place that Killer Is Me ever came out, was on the Unplugged record. So, like Dirt, Alice in Chains Unplugged and Sap were readily available just a couple of years ago from Music on Vinyl. So this is the Music on Vinyl pressing. There's unofficial copies of this as well now, because again, there's so much demand for it. An absolutely beautiful record through and through. The sound is phenomenal. The mastering on this is great. So if you can pick up a copy of Unplugged, Music on Vinyl, it'll cost you a little bit these days, but it is well worth it. And again, hopefully represses are coming. I find it hard to believe that they're not going to follow up the Dirt campaign. Well, they did Facelift in 2020. Now you got Dirt 2022. So hopefully they're going to keep going and release, maybe another record a year or something until they've gotten through the whole catalog. But I'm waiting along with all of you. So that's the last album with Lane. Obviously, the band went into a completely dormant period for many years after that. When Lane passed away. And then they reemerged years later with William Duvall, who, if you're not familiar with kind of the second phase of Alice in Chains, you're really missing out. If you're a fan of the early days and you're a big Lane fan and you're just holding out and you're like, it's not the same without Lane, I get it. It's a bit of a different band. But I will tell you, I've seen the William Duvall version of Alice in Chains a number of times, and they are absolutely phenomenal. And the records that they have put out are all top notch. I'm not saying they compare with Dirt and, Jar Flies and Self-Titled, like it's just kind of a different thing. It's hard to really to regain that amount of awesomeness from your early years. But got to keep in mind, this one's unique because Jerry writes the vast majority of all of these songs in the early days and up to current day. So for me, it's a little easier to accept a new version of Alice in Chains versus newer versions of other bands like maybe Stone Temple Pilots or Blind Melon, or bands that have gone on to have second lives with different lead vocalists because their vocalists have unfortunately passed away. But because Jerry's there, and Jerry is the primary songwriter and on a lot of songs, primary vocalist as well, with Lane just lending backup on the early songs. So when William steps in, fast forward to 2009, and you've got Black Gives Way to Blue. I'll only say it once. I think all of Alice in Chains records after the Lane era are pretty underrated, like I mentioned. So I'll only say that once, I promise. All of these, the William Duvall era Alice in Chains records are also pretty much out of print at this time. That includes Black Gives Way to Blue. I think the only version of this, the 2009 version, is on clear vinyl. I don't think there's a black vinyl version. I could be wrong there, but this is a great album. I think it was a really, really great reintroduction for the band. The main single, I believe, was Check My Brain, also Your Decision. But it's a great record all the way through. I would really encourage you to check it out. The title track is great as well. It sounds just like Alice in Chains, but what I love about William Duvall is he's got his own style, but he can pull off Lane's style as well, but he doesn't really try to emulate. He's more up there, kind of in Lane's honor, if you will, doing the songs justice, like I think they deserve. And that's the thing about a band like this, especially for someone like Jerry and also Sean and Mike Inez, who entered after the Dirt era. This is all they know how to do. It's their livelihood, it's their lives, and they're the only ones that can keep this music alive. So I'm so glad they're doing it. I'm so glad that they have persevered, and it's just a really cool thing that they've had a second life, if you will. So Black Gives Way to Blue was 2009. They waited another 4 years before they put out The Devil Put Dinosaurs Here. Now, this is a unique one because the only official version of this album that came out in 2013 was a picture disc. I don't own that picture disc. I would love to own it, even though I'm not a big fan of picture discs, but I am a completionist when it comes to certain bands like Alice in Chains. And this is a great record. Of all of the 3 albums that they've put out with William Duvall, Black Gives Way to Blue, The Devil Put Dinosaurs Here, and then Rainier Frog, this is my favorite. I think you've got some tracks on this which are as hard-hitting as any of their stuff, including the early days, believe it or not. The song Hollow is great. Stone is an incredible riff, of course, written by Cantrell. So I love this record through and through. This is an unofficial copy because, again, the only version, it's never been reissued other than, and that original picture disc version was the only one that's come out. This is a double LP on white vinyl that's semi still available here and there. It's been pressed in the last couple of years. Again, unofficial, coming out of Europe, but love that record. I'm hopeful that they continue the reissue campaign with all of these. Up through 2018 with Rainier Frog, the last full release the band has put out, also out of print, hard to find. There's a couple different versions of this one. I think it's cool because it's got the die cut sleeve there. I think this is a black vinyl version that I have. Yeah, black vinyl, double LP. And again, just a really quality album. Doesn't get the attention it deserves from Alice in Chains fans, I don't think, just because most people harken on the earlier days. But the title track's great. Drone, Red Giant, The One You Know was the lead-off track, I think was the big single. So again, just a quality rock record, and I think William Duvall has really stepped into his own with the band. So I can't say that enough, especially seeing them live. Just a great live show. So that is the main studio catalog. I have a couple other releases here, kind of odds and ends, and another couple unofficial things, I think. So live Facelift released November 25th, 2016. This is another record store day, in case you didn't notice. Alice in Chains likes record store day, or at least their label Sony does. So this is the first time this came out on vinyl. This is limited edition and numbered. I think this is copy number 1178. And just a really great live set. I think this was recorded at the Showbox, maybe. Where is this? See if it says. No, at the Moore Theater. Recorded at the Moore Theater, which is an iconic theater that a lot of these bands, a lot of the early Seattle bands played at. It was recorded December 22nd, 1990. It Ain't Like That, Man in the Box, Real Thing, Love, Hate, Love, Sea of Sorrow, and Bleed the Freak. So great live versions of Facelift. This one's pretty hard to come by, pretty collectible. Prior to getting an official version, I did have an unofficial. I think this is a red vinyl version. No, it's a white vinyl version. So again, I've got placeholders, if you will. I had unofficial copies until I was able to acquire the official one. So I love the live Facelift record. A lot of energy, a great live set. Cool hearing those live. And then I've got, this is a 2006 festival radio broadcast with William. This is the only thing live I have with William. And this is, looks like a 10-track LP featuring stuff from the whole catalog, mostly from the earlier days. This doesn't have, they didn't even put any of the Williams tracks on here, but really cool radio broadcast, and I like that one just because I don't have anything else with William on it from a live perspective. And then last but not least, this is another unofficial thing. The greatest hits from Alice in Chains came out in 2001. It's never been released on vinyl, which is why people overseas decided they would press it. This is kind of like a off-white or cream-colored pinkish vinyl. And just a cool, I like the artwork. Again, they kind of mirrored the artwork from the CD, and this is another 10-track that features stuff from all of the early albums. So just another kind of completionist thing I like to have. So that's everything I've got. Again, I've got a few other 7-inch singles. I would love to see them release Nothing Safe, Best of the Box, which was a CD box set that came out in the late 90s, as well as Music Bank, which was an extensive 3 CD. So Nothing Safe was the best of Music Bank. Music Bank is a 3 CD set. Really cool packaging. I think I've got it on CD somewhere. And it would be amazing if they released that at some point. I think it has some unreleased stuff, and you know, it would be a cool collector's item, a cool box set. The other item I do have on the way, which I don't have yet, which I'm sure I'll do an unboxing of when I do get it, is the box set deluxe version of Dirt, which is coming. I think that's supposed to come here in the next month or so, October time frame. So I'm excited about that. You know, so there you go. There's my Alice in Chains collection. It's always fun walking through these because, you know, you don't sit down and go through a whole discography of an artist very often. So I enjoy doing these videos. And like I mentioned, I don't know anything more than you do in regards to represses. I hope they're coming. Common sense would tell you they are. I can't imagine that, especially seeing the success from the Dirt campaign and the 30th remaster there. I don't know why they wouldn't follow suit. So let's all hope that the Sony and Columbia and those who own the copyrights to those early albums do the right thing and do these albums justice and put them out there so people can enjoy the music and have them on their shelf and own a piece of, in my opinion, rock history as far as the 90s are concerned and what Alice in Chains meant to that whole scene. So thank you, as always. This has been another episode of Talking About Records. My name is G.I. Sanders. Would love your comments and feedback. Feel free to contact me anytime. You can get me at info@ntxvinyl.com. Stick around on the channel for more content. We'll pop up a few other videos, and we will see you again next time.